I quit my own fat loss 4 times before I understood what was actually happening. Not 4 different programs. 4 times I quit something that was working. The first few times, it was just impatience. 6 weeks in, I felt I looked more or less the same. My belly fat was still there and I was done. Actually, my belly fat looked exactly the same. And then as I got older, I started blaming other things. Look, my belly fat's there, maybe it's my metabolism, maybe it's carbs. And I convinced myself my approach was wrong. So I switched to something new and the whole cycle started again. But what I didn't realize until much later was I kept stopping the exact same point right before I started to lose the belly fat, right before it started to be noticeable. And I've worked with over 200 men. And I can tell you that this is not just me. There's this specific window, almost universal, where men walk away from something that's actually working right before they lose their belly fat. And the frustrating part, it's predictable. And most of the time I see it coming. Now, when a client messages me around week 5 or 6, maybe even earlier sometimes, saying they're not seeing the results, their belly fat looks exactly the same, my first thought isn't to be concerned. It's recognition, because it's almost always the same window. 4 to 8 weeks in, or even I'd say 3 to 8 weeks in, but most of the time somewhere between 4 to 8. The early wins have stopped feeling impactful, and the slow work that's actually happening hasn't shown up yet. Belly fat looks more or less the same, and we all know belly fat is stubborn. Now, everything about how it feels points towards the same conclusion. This isn't right. Try something else. And I felt the exact same thing myself, multiple times. And even knowing what I know now, having watched hundreds of men go through it, the feeling when you're in it is very convincing. You see these videos promising like losing your belly fat in 60 days or 30 days, and you think that there must be something else to it. It doesn't feel like impatience. It doesn't even feel like stubborn fat. It just feels like evidence. The scale isn't moving. The mirror isn't exciting. Even when you grab down, you're still grabbing the same amount of fat. Now you're tired of thinking about food. And the natural conclusion is the approach isn't working. So you stop or you pivot, or you tell yourself you'll come back to it when life settles down a bit. And I can tell you now, it never does. What I didn't understand for years is this stretch, the slow, unexciting middle. This is where the actual work is. Not the early weeks when your motivation is high and water weight is dropping faster than actual fat. Not the later weeks when things are visibly changing week on week. This part, the part that looks like nothing's happening. And I mean it, it does look like that. Now, the only thing that separates men who get results from the men who don't is whether they can get through this window without pulling the trigger. So now I look at it, it doesn't make sense. I'm trying to lose belly fat. And for a long time, I base my entire assessment, my entire progress on the number on the scale. And this wasn't weekly trends or waist measurements or even photos, just the number on the scale. And if it went up, which it did regularly, as it does for everyone, I look at it as the decider. This was it. I remember standing on a scale after a genuinely really good week. I ate well. I trained really well, hit PRs, 4 sessions, and consistently got 7 to 8 hours sleep. Yet the number on the scale was up nearly 3 pounds from the week before. And I was done. And this is with the kind of done that you go downstairs, you eat something, and you just keep eating because the effort clearly isn't paying off anyway. So what's the point? What I didn't know at the time was that you can see a weight shift of 5 to 10 pounds in a single day from water alone, sodium, glycogen, stress, whether you trained or not. Yet the most fat you can store from a big meal is maybe around a pound. Yet you're 5 to 10 pounds up, but none of it's fat. And at that point, I didn't know to take waist measurements. I didn't know to take photos. I had one data point and I was making key decisions based off it. Decisions that cost me months repeatedly. But the research is clear on this. Day-to-day scale numbers tell you almost nothing about fat loss. What they tell you is the trend over like 2, 3, even 4 weeks. And what tells you even more is your waist. Because the scale can stay flat while fat is leaving and muscle is arriving at exactly the same time. That gap, fat out, then muscle in, that's the real progress you're after. And of course, I can't get my time back. It's wasted, it's done. I made those mistakes. But what I can do is make sure you get your time back. You stop wasting time. So about 5 weeks of working together, Hossam sent me a message on a Sunday afternoon. He had been doing the work, training 4 times a week, tracking his food, staying consistent. And then I get the message. I have a lot going on. I want to pick this up in a few months, if that's okay with you. My first thought before the coaching response was week 5, right in the range. I've seen this so many times, I can almost predict the week it arrives. It's nearly always somewhere between that 4 to 8 week window, if you want to call it that. This isn't because something is wrong, but because the early phase of physical progress, like the real significant drops on a scale, they're slower, they're steadier, but the work is happening underneath the surface where you can't yet see it. What Sam felt was nothing was working. But when I looked at his averages, not a single weigh in, he had lost another 1.5 inches off his waist. And he was down another 2 pounds that week. So he was 8 pounds down in 5 weeks. And that might seem slow, but that's fat loss. He was 3 inches down in his waist at that point as well. So again, that's belly fat loss. But he was watching his daily fluctuations and reading them as an issue. They weren't. This is what happens when fat loss is not linear. I asked him to give it just 2 more weeks. He wasn't excited, but he just agreed. He was like, okay. And I made 2 small changes. I switched up his workouts so he took less time. They just felt easier to get done within his day. And I got him using MyFitnessPal for more predictability. And that was it. No wild protocols, just predictability and more control. Then 2 weeks later, the weight loss continued. Down another 3 pounds. His waist was down another inch. He was close when he messaged me, but he just couldn't see it yet. At this point, he actually started to see the results. He started to notice that his pants were fitting him differently. But the thing is, all his previous methods were predicated on extremes. And there's a reason this window catches almost everyone, including men who know better. The first thing is a gap between what fat loss looks like and what it's supposed to look like. That's huge. We've all consumed similar content. We've seen crazy transformations where people lose like 30 pounds in 30 days or even more, like 50 pounds in 60 days or 60 pounds in 60 days. We've all seen that crazy before and after. We've seen the 35 pounds in, whatever time. We've all seen those. And we've seen the lies that some people promote. Now that's become the baseline in your head. You think that's what your results should look like. Your brain has calibrated it. It thinks if you're not getting those results, you're failing. And now when it looks at your 6 weeks and it doesn't look like you're on track for that, you can imagine, and you probably know what happens here. You start looking for new things. You start looking for something else to do or something else to change. And you feel like your plan is failing. Now, the research says 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week is a solid rate of actual fat loss. We're not just talking about weight. For most men I work with, that means the real transformation, the kind that genuinely changes how you look, starts showing up clearly when you've lost around, when you're in about week 10 or 14, not week 6. And when you're expecting 6 and get 6, it doesn't look like anything. This is not a failure on your part. This is just the human timeline. And the second thing is, a stall almost never means what you think it means. The story circulates constantly that if your weight stops moving, your metabolism must be damaged. Too much dieting. Your body's adapted and now it's barely burning anything. The research says metabolic adaptation is real, yes, but nowhere near as dramatic as that. The actual slowdown is about a pound. Well, for every pound of fat lost, it's like 6 calories less a day. But what's usually happening in that stall is that tracking has quietly drifted. Your weekends are looser and your weekday portions are slightly larger than what you actually logged. What feels like 1,800 calories, sitting close to 2,200. Maybe your activity has dropped without you consciously deciding to actually move less. And both are fixable, not a sign your metabolism is breaking. And the third that gets most people is hunger. And the leaner you get, the louder it goes, or the further in you go, because you might be like, oh, I'm not getting leaner. After a period of fat loss, your appetite doesn't just go up like by a small amount. It really does increase significantly. The research shows that appetite rises by roughly 9 times more than metabolic rate goes down. For each pound lost, you're talking about 50 calories increase in appetite. So you lose 10 pounds. That's a 500 calorie increase in appetite. So now you're not just burning fewer calories, you're noticeably more hungry than you were at the start. And if your environment hasn't changed, and this is a big one, let's say you have the same things in your cupboard, you have the same tired evenings, and even the same patterns, your hunger will win all day. And this isn't because you are missing something or because you haven't got enough discipline, but because you're fighting a 4-to-1 disadvantage in an environment that hasn't caught up with where you're at. So the first shift is deciding up front that you're not allowed to make any verdict until week 12, not week 5 or 7. Don't let like a Sunday feeling just dictate that. Week 12, you pre-commit the runway before you begin, because the feeling in week 6 is real and it's also consistently wrong. If Osama had been allowed to make a call based on how he felt that afternoon, he'd have walked. He wouldn't still be lean years and years later. The feeling was understandable, but it was also inaccurate. He needed more runway to actually see what the data was. The second shift is to tighten tracking before you touch anything else. I can assure you that something can drift there quite fast. When things stall, obviously the instinct is to cut harder. You add in cardio, do something more aggressive, but in most cases, the right move is to spend, I wouldn't say a week, I'll just recalibrate. Just go back to tracking how you did to begin with. Weigh everything, log it before eating, not after or the next day, in real time. And you want to be honest about the things that have quietly slipped. And that alone gets most people moving again. Cutting further when tracking has already drifted just means a worse deficit on paper and a harder rebound in 6 weeks and feeling worse in the entire process. And last, at least 3 sessions of progressive strength training a week. And that can be your floor. In most cases, it's enough for most people. I will never shut up about this, but the research is so consistent. Lifting in a deficit protects muscle better than anything else. You lose more fat, less muscle, and you look a lot better at any given weight. And 3 sessions done consistently can achieve that. If you're already doing 4 to 5, stick with that. Just don't think you're speeding things up by jumping from 2 to 5 sessions, even if that worked in your 20s. Less done consistently beats more done badly. I've watched this play out way too many times to argue about it. So I lost over a year of progress across those 4 attempts. Impatience, the wrong information, and blaming the wrong things. All of it was avoidable. And if you're ticking the boxes I laid out in this video, your belly fat breakthrough is around the corner. You just need to stick with it. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe first and watch this one next. I'll see you there.